I'm really excited to turn it over to our next set of speakers. First up, we have Shanelle Reese, who's the Chief People Officer of PresenceLearning. Shanelle carries a wide spectrum of experience, bringing cross-industry experience and leveraging her functional expertise and deep understanding of operational and financial challenges that startups and enterprise companies face, especially in terms of achieving long-term profitability and stability. Prior to PresenceLearning, Shanelle led HR operations at Amerit. Joining her is going to be Kate Eberly Walker, who is the CEO of PresenceLearning. They're the leading provider of special education teletherapy services and software. PresenceLearning connects speech-language pathologists, occupational therapists, and behavior and mental health specialists to hundreds of schools and districts nationwide. Kate is the author of the book, The Good Boss, 9 Ways Every Manager Can Support Women at Work. She serves on the boards of numerous companies and mentors several ed tech entrepreneurs. And Kate previously served as CEO of the Princeton Review and Tutor.com. They're going to be joining conversation with our own amazing Hunter Canning, who is a virtual event host with Power to Fly. Hunter, I'm going to turn the stage over to you. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Meg. And welcome, Kate and Shanelle. It's so great to have you here. I'm so pleased. I have so many questions, so let's jump right in. We're going to discuss we're going to discuss DEI and B, the future of work, women in the workplace, and how it all ties together. But first, can you tell me a bit about that added B in DEI and why do you think it needs to be there? Shanelle, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I think the B is important because I think historically a lot of focus has been on getting diversity in the door, but we haven't talked a lot about how you retain that diversity. So getting in the door is great, but the B is important because you want to make sure you're creating space for those individuals you're bringing in such that they feel like they can bring their authentic selves to work. So we say diversity, equity, inclusion, yes, but also don't forget about the belonging. It's important to make sure you're kind of creating a sense of community at work where people feel like they can bring their whole authentic selves to work.
Yeah, and I would just add we also talk about it in terms of the cost of not belonging and what the emotional labor and other work that creates for employees that don't belong, don't feel like they belong. You know, you spend when you don't feel like you fit in somewhere, you've just spent so much time thinking about how to present your work, how to speak, how to look, you know, things that don't really have anything to do with the substance of the work, and you don't have that freedom to just focus and do your work and have it accepted for what it is. You spend a lot of time and do extra work to present it in a certain way to try to have it fit. And so we try to design workplaces that avoid that, save people from that extra effort and stress, so we can all just get the work done together.
Agreed.
Today, we've heard a lot about, as it's been a big part, I think, of everyone's lives over the past 2 years, is the Great Resignation. And it's teaching us a lot about employees and, you know, we were just talking about the B, right? And belonging. I think we're learning a lot about how people feel that they don't belong. So what do you foresee for the future of work in order to reserve, you know, this trend and to build relationships of trust between employees and employers? Shanelle, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I think that's where that sense of community and building community comes in. And we do that in a variety of ways. I mean, we require unconscious bias for all of our employees. You know, we started with our leadership team and then our people managers, and then we rolled it out to all of our individual contributors. And it sets the tone for employees at day one. Like, they know that we have an expectation. We're talking about it. We know that it exists, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to empower our employees to speak up when they see it. We also try and commit a lot of resources to ensuring we give power to voice for our employees. So trying to create mutual understanding and empathy, and leaning into those things that bring us together or we have in common. So some of it is, you know, we have ERGs that support, you know, sexual orientation, race, gender, all of those things. But we also have those things that bring us together that we find that we are very similar. So like, I think is it 95% of our population, Kate, that owns pets? So, you know, we lean into that. We lean into those things that bring us together as a community that we have in common. We have a pet tales channel. That's our most popular Slack channel, where people are posting things from goats to micro pigs to cats to lizards, like everything you can imagine. So we really try to, again, create that sense of community at work so that people feel that sense of belonging and people want to stay. It feels like a family. And I think that's really important for employers. Employees want more than just, what they can do for you. What can you do for them? What do you bring to them? So we also lean into learning and development opportunities as well. Like, how can we make sure we're providing those? And we also understand that it's not going to be the same for everyone. Not everyone wants to maybe get that promotion. Some people want to sharpen the skills they already have and be better at the work that they currently do. So we're constantly playing around with ways in which we can make our employees feel like that they belong, they feel supported, and they feel like we're invested in them and their learning and development.
I love the shout outs to the fun Slack channels. We have a few of those at Power to Fly. We have an animal one.
Yeah.
We also have team appreciation, where people just say, hey, this person's doing great. And I just like to flip through it and just see, it's nice when someone gives you a shout out, sure, but it feels even better to give a shout out to somebody.
Yeah, we have a high fives channel that does that. And the great thing about most of these Slack channels is that they're organic. Like, people do it and you see the community building and the relationships building, and we don't force it. I mean, we don't really say, hey, you need to post in here. People organically go there, and it kind of creates its own organic community. That's phenomenal. We love it.
Mm-hmm. And just a reminder to the audience, we can take questions here. So if anything is coming up for you, please feel free to chime in. We would love to hear from you, and have these amazing speakers here to answer your questions. So Kate, maybe you can speak to, and I don't know the numbers, and maybe you do, but how women have left the workforce in droves during the pandemic, and what do employees need to do better or employers, what do they need to do better to keep them?
Yeah, this is a big topic. We've definitely seen significantly more women than men have left the workforce during COVID, particularly working mothers who, felt they had no option but to leave because the tensions with their caregiving responsibilities were just too much. So there's a lot of things that employers can do, should definitely be thinking about to bring women back and to retain them in the workplace. I think the biggest one, I have to start by talking about remote work. And, of course, as we've said at PresenceLearning, we've built our whole business on remote therapy, recruiting therapists who want to work with kids, want to connect with kids, but want to do so working from home. And we have a majority female population of our corporate employees, our therapists. It's a lot of women, and that is not a coincidence. When you survey men and women more so than men prefer remote work. And even more so when it's working moms. And, in fact, many moms who don't work say they would if they had an opportunity where they could work remotely from home. Or, they might leave a job because they don't have that ability, that flexibility to work remotely. And that's just a non-starter for them. I think, women need flexibility, and working from home it's more efficient. Can multitask, you can save time on the commute, all of those things that we all know that we've all experienced over these past couple of years in particular. Men like remote work too, don't get me wrong, but women prefer it by, about 2/3 of all women say they prefer to work fully remotely versus about half of all men. So that's a big thing. And then there's a lot of other stuff that you can do to support women. I think there's the baseline things that you have to give people the supports that they need to actually be able to come to work and focus on work. So that's childcare, flexible PTO, healthcare and other benefits, mental health resources, support people. People will leave a job when they can't figure out a way to stay. So, help them be able to balance their lives and everything that's going on in them by giving resources and giving benefits. Then there's what Shanelle's talked about a lot. There's building a community, establishing relationships. That can be mentors. That starts with your very own manager, being an inclusive manager who's creating dialogues at work and opportunities at work where everybody, it feels a part of it and feels loyalty to each other and connections to each other. Again, people stay for other people. That's why they stay, not because, not because of just the work in a vacuum or the pay in a vacuum. I think it's about the people you work with and that feeling, that experience of commitment. And then lastly, sorry, I warned you, I have a lot to say about this one. Lastly, it's showing that it's worthwhile to stay at a company, that there's opportunity. There's going to be promotions, there's going to be growth opportunities, there's going to be raises, and putting your money where your mouth is, showing that if you stay here and invest in our company, we will invest in you as well.
Thank you for that. And there's, you touched on what Shanelle was talking about earlier is community, and we have a few questions coming in about community from our listeners. First question is, how important is it to create the sense of community for contractors or temporary workers versus permanent full-time employees? Employers may see this as wasted efforts. Shanelle, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. I think that it depends on how you're using those temporary and contract workers. We have a population of contract workers ourselves. We do have a platform where they share, they can communicate with one another. So we do provide the opportunity for our contract workers to connect with one another through our platform. It really depends on what the workforce looks like. I do think it's important for anything, even if it's contract work, to provide some sort of mechanism for people to feel a part of something, right? Because I think that's important. People want to feel like they're a part of a community, even if you're not there as a full-time worker, even if you're just, even I know even people who are Uber drivers who know other Uber drivers, and there's like this sense of community in that. So I just think it depends on how you do it, but I think it's important to provide some sort of mechanism for people to be able to connect. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an employee relationship. It can be a 1099. It can be a contractor. I mean, we have contractors that come in all the time, and we don't see them any differently. We don't treat them any differently than we do a regular employee. We see them as a valuable resource that's helping us accomplish the work. So I think it's important to try and provide that mechanism, but I also understand it might not be feasible in every business model.
Yeah, and a related question, if we can maybe expand it a little bit, for Lindsay asked, how can we better develop community in workplaces where employees don't have as much flexibility in their schedules, don't have access to online platforms like Slack, specifically healthcare workers? Would either of you like to jump on that one? That's a very specific question, but it's in the spirit of community.
It is a very specific question. I've spent some time in healthcare, and I have a lot of friends that work in the healthcare community, and there is an organic community that forms outside of the workplace. I mean, whenever I have nurse friends that get together, they're always sharing anecdotal stories and things of the such. So I understand it's not always easy for them to have the same kind of flexibility, but there are even Facebook groups, there are LinkedIn groups, there are different platforms outside of an employer's platform that allow for that sense of community. And I will say now in 2022, there are lots of platforms to be able to do that. But I remember before, when I started early on in my career, there weren't many. I had to seek and try and find those organizations that would host events so that you can still, again, have that sense of community with people in similar fields. So I would say if you don't have access to it, you can proactively go out to whether it's a nurses union or whatever it might be, and find an association that will typically have interest groups that reflect that particular industry. And I know I did that a lot throughout my career. I continue to do it even today. I'm a part of Chief, again, looking for that sense of community, not necessarily at work, outside of work. So I think I would explore what resources are available and find ways to connect with people from similar backgrounds and or similar functions and industries.
Yeah, and just adding to that, we have over 1,000 speech therapists that work with us, and they're working in all different places, different schools, living all over the country. But you see when they come together, just having, fellow professionals that you can talk to who get it, who understand the kind of work you're doing. It doesn't have to be that sort of like water cooler chit chat where it's really about, talking about like the coworkers or the specifics of the company. It can be really, it can really go a long way to help you not feel isolated, to just have somebody who does similar work to you, who you can connect with. And we see it when we go to these, Shanelle said associations, when we go to the speech language associations conferences, and I see these women who've never met before just have this immediate rapport because they do the same kind of work and they know that there's, affinity in that.
Mm. And Kate, you mentioned speech therapy and resources and the different platforms. Do you think you could share a bit about Present Learning's teletherapy offerings and the importance of mental health for young people and adults?
Yeah. So at PresenceLearning, we were among the earliest companies to bring online therapy into schools. And so, as I said, starting with speech therapy and starting with bringing it to, some of the most at-risk populations, specifically children with special needs and special education programs who needed supports and weren't necessarily getting them. And what we found was that the teletherapy model it can literally bring you the right expert when there might not be that person with that expertise, right there available in your town or in your community. But it also can just create a different kind of connection and trust and, sort of privacy we find for kids. And it's true for adults as well. There's, particularly as we've expanded from speech to mental health counseling, behavioral counseling, some of those areas, there's a different kind of comfort level with the anonymity of no one sees you walking into the therapist's office, and we're all talking to people on our screens in all types of contexts, right? Whether it be Zoom or FaceTime or what have you. And so it's that as that has become a more and more normalized behavior, it really makes it easier to tap into these forms of therapy and these conversations with experts in a comfortable way. And so, for us, that starts with the schools. I think, there's a growing belief that schools are, responsible for not just the academic education of kids, but the mental health and wellness as well. And, many believe that extends not only to the children, but to their families and to the communities. And so that's one way through the public education system that, that we've taken the approach of getting more access to mental health supports out and into the communities. And there are lots of other really great companies that are doing it in a more targeted way for adults. And, I think it makes it easier to ask for, to access, to get the help that you need without feeling that sort of stigma that there used to be. So I think we've come a long way in that regard, thanks to teletherapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I go to it every week. It's a huge help for me. I know I need it,
Mm-hmm.
So we have a question from Molly that is asking, and maybe Shanelle, you'd like to touch on this. What are some of the less obvious things, comments, companies, activities, et cetera, that make people feel like that they don't belong?
Less obvious. Well, I can tell you one specific one that we've dealt with in our organization. We are 75% female as a workforce, and sometimes we get familiar with our language. So usually it's the opposite. Hey guys, we will have someone say, hey ladies, but there's a gentleman also in the room. And so there are times when I think there's a level of familiarity that you have to be cognizant of and make sure does not, in some ways make someone feel as if they're not part of the group. So we talk about that in our unconscious bias training, saying, hey girls, hey ladies, or whatever it might be, and not being self-aware of who's in the room and being respectful of others is indeed it's something that can make someone feel like they're not on the inside. We just went through a merger with another company and they have a good portion of the population, not the whole population, but a good portion of them don't drink alcohol. And we were sending out Christmas gifts. And so at the time we had already ordered them and everything. And so we had to try and figure out a way where we could come up with an alternative to that or be respectful of that, those specific individuals. And so I think at times, you talk about happy hours and Christmas parties, people just automatically assume, but then you could be sending something out that might not necessarily be indicative of a person's lifestyle choice. So it's just small things that are not always intentional, but I do feel like are great learning experiences. And I always feel fortunate when someone comes and says something and, educates one another, whether it be a people manager or myself, whomever it might be, they just share information like, hey, this didn't feel great. But I also think that makes me feel good as a people leader that person felt comfortable enough. So we've done enough where people feel comfortable enough to say, hey, this didn't feel good. I know it wasn't the intention. And, we try and figure out ways in which we can mediate that and make sure we don't make those mistakes. I don't think a lot of times honestly, there are plenty of times when I think people have good intentions and don't mean to exclude, but sometimes it's the language and the words that we use unintentionally that can exclude others. So I always tell people, think about your words and what you say. And sometimes, if you're in a situation, even if someone does bring into your attention, even if you didn't mean it, just apologize and acknowledge it, because it's really about someone feeling heard, feeling like, their feelings are validated and giving each other mutual respect, which I think is so important.
Yeah. And being really aware of when any type of conversation, whether it's a business topic or a personal topic or chit chat, being really aware of when it gets too homogenous, to one note, and making sure to try to give room in the conversation to ask someone who's not talking. I mean, it can happen, we can have in a meeting and go around and talk about what you're doing for the weekend, and like everybody's going skiing, but not everybody, right? Like it feels like everybody's going skiing, but not everybody skis. Me, for example, I don't ski. So, paying attention to when something's happening that is getting a little too one note, and trying to ask someone who's not talking, what are you doing this weekend? Or to, introduce something yourself that is different. I think, there's certainly more literal applications of that, right? Like we look at our teams for all types of diversity, and we all know that the discussions will be better, the work will be better if there are multiple aspects of diversity and you're not too one note in any way. And I think that can be true, like Shanelle said, and even the smallest conversations. It can be true in the way you invite participation. One thing that I've learned is that, you'll always have certain people, and you don't want to overly reward the people who are really assertive with their opinions and really quick to talk and maybe really loud to talk. There are some people that, that's not their nature, but everybody has really great ideas. Everybody has something to say. So giving other forums, having a Google Doc before the meeting where people are inputting topics or ideas that as a leader, as a moderator, you can pull from that and prompt and give credit where credit is due. I think all of that can go a long way to just, have people really feel that, we're all trying to introduce multiple perspectives. We value differences, not homogeneity.
I love hearing that detail about the Google Doc before the meeting. That's so I think that's such a gem. That's so valuable, because there's some people that, very charismatic, they're fine, and they'll start talking even if they don't know what they're going to say yet. Stuff is just coming out of their mouth. Or maybe they're a great public speaker and they have a good idea. But there's a lot of great ideas that are just silently sitting in the room. And I feel like that is one way that gives a lot of people access to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I also love, Shanelle, too, when you're talking about the language guys, ladies and stuff. And I have to say the word folks has saved me in 2020 moving forward. It's like, hey, folks, I think I can thank our, 2 presidents ago for that. Obama was like, he was really good with that word. And I was like, yes, folks, that's what how I'm addressing a room now. So we have just a couple minutes left. There's one other question before we wrap up that was from the audience as well. Shanelle, I was wondering if you could, can you Nadia, I believe is your name. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it. How would you differentiate between inclusion from belonging?
Yeah, I think inclusion are the things that we do to try and bring people inside the paradigm, right? To make sure everyone is equitably represented. And belonging is the feeling we get from those actions. So inclusion, whether that's ERGs, unconscious bias, all the things that we do to make it inclusive. And then belonging is the sense that you get when those things happen and you feel like you can bring your full self to work, right? I mean, I think, and that can evolve over the course of time. Like one of the things we talk about in unconscious bias training is covering, and how people downplay a trait that they believe is unfavorable to them. And, there are times when, I'm early in my career, I felt like I got dinged for being a mom. So I downplayed being a mom. And then as my career progressed, I felt like I had to downplay my race in some instances, even though it's obvious. And so I really do think that, ensuring that we are taking the actions that allow for that sense, that emotional sense of belonging is so important. And that's how I differentiate between the two. Inclusivity is the things that we do, and belonging is the feeling we get from those things.
That's beautifully put. And to wrap us up, and I think it's a great segue, is you're talking about how there were times in your career where you felt you had to downplay. So on the other side of that, what role does supporting mental health play in encouraging folks to bring their whole selves to their work?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of the pandemic has been that we are more openly talking about and normalizing talk about mental health. And so, there were times as we were going through this, we were living through all this where we said, check in on your employees, and you don't have to probe, but just asking, how are you? How are you doing? Or how are you doing? Are things okay? And we prompted our people managers to do that throughout the pandemic. And of course, some people shared, some people didn't. We really tried to proactively share all the mental health resources that they had available to them, reminding people, whether it be through our benefits provider or wellness program, really ensuring that we are checking in on our employees and talking about it. We started normalizing, even as leaders, when I wasn't when I was struggling, when my kids were home and, we're all trying to get on the internet. Like there was this, honestly, the sense of community that the pandemic, did help bring about, because we were all dealing with some of the same challenges. It was kind of an even playing field. So I think mental health and talking about it, normalizing it, is super important in the workplace.
Yeah.
Kate, anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, you said it so well. I do think it's about being authentic, being real people at work, right? Not having like this work persona and this personal persona, not having the split personality thing, and just being authentic. And I think, we have come a long way in acknowledging, I think, especially because during the pandemic, you could see what was going on in people's houses, and their kids might intrude on the screen. Like you got to see a more real side of people. And, everybody kind of got through the like trying to hide it or trying to apologize for it, and to just be honest. And, I feel it every day at work now. I'm much more likely when someone, asks the chit chat, how's it going? How's your, people today, it's Monday, right? How's your weekend? I've noticed that I'm much more likely to be honest. Like I lost my patience with my 13-year-old daughter yesterday, and it was still weighing on me this morning. And I talked about it in one of my meetings this morning, because that was the true real answer. And it helped me. So, I want to create an atmosphere where everybody feels like they can do that too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Shanelle and Kate. We're out of time. How can our listeners stay in connection with you, and what's the best way to reach out?
So you can find us on LinkedIn, both Shanelle and I, and PresenceLearning. Find us there, and we'll connect you through if you're interested in learning more about PresenceLearning or more about us. We'd love to interact with you there.
Definitely.
Great. Kate, Shanelle, thank you for bringing your whole selves to this conversation. And thank you for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.